The history of the Apocrypha. The Holy Bible, 1611 edition, King James Version. King James authorized the translation of the Bible into English from the Hebrew and the Greek, including the Apocrypha that was in the Greek as well. This will be the history of the Apocrypha as documented in the 1611 edition of the King James Version of the Bible. This is my 1611 King James Version Bible, and this is the end of the Old Testament in the book of Malachi on the left, and then the beginning of the Apocrypha. It is in between the Old Testament and the New Testament, or between the books of Malachi and the books of Matthew. As we advance in the Apocrypha introduction, we see the publisher's preface. The Apocrypha in the King James Version. Modern readers of the King James or Authorized Version may be surprised to learn that for the first 200 years of its publication, most editions of this well-known translation included the books of the Apocrypha. These 14, sometimes numbered as 15 books, and portions of the books have a long history in the church and were a point of contention between the Roman Catholic Church and the Reformers. All of the Reformers were other Europeans. The significant one, most noted, is Martin Luther. This introductory essay surveys the origin of these books, the history of their inclusion in Greek and Latin manuscripts, and their inclusion in early English translations. The origin of the apocryphal books. The word apocrypha, which means, quote, hidden or secret, is used to distinguish religious writings that are not considered authoritative from those that are. Authoritative books are called canonical. The books commonly labeled apocryphal in Protestant translations of the Bible are of Jewish origin. Josephus, the famous Jewish historian, writing in the 1st century AD, notes, "We have not an innumerable multitude of books among us, disagreeing from and contradicting one another as the Greeks have, but only 22 books, which contain the records of the past times, which are justly believed to be divine. It is true our history has been written since Artaxerxes very particularly, but have not been esteemed of the like authority with the former by our forefathers, because there have not been an exact succession of prophets since that time." Now, when we read the note at the bottom, you're going to see some very good details about the numbering of the books, because people today think that the 66 books has always been what it is, and that's not true. So it goes on to read, Josephus's 22 books, end quote, are the same as the 39 books of the Protestant Old Testament. We're going to see right down here at the bottom. Under Josephus, we're going to start at 2, note 2. The 12, quote, prophets are counted as one book in the Hebrew canon. That reduces the number from 39 to 28. The 8 books, 1st to 2nd Samuel, 1st to 2nd Kings, 1st to 2nd Chronicles, and Ezra and Nehemiah are considered as 4 combined books, bringing the total to 24. Some scholars assume he combined Judges with Ruth and Jeremiah with Lamentations to bring the total to 22, the same number as letters in the Hebrew alphabet. Going on to the next page, we also have to note that they are going to insert this word Jewish into the dialogue, because this is what they want to direct the attention and narrative to, that Europeans are the only people that can be identified as the Israelites, but they don't call themselves Israelites, and that's another subject for another lesson. The language of the converts is very, very, very confusing. And you have to be careful when you're listening to them, and you have to be very attentive to what they're saying. The books of the Israelites, quote, history has been written since Artaxerxes certainly refers to at least some of the books that are found in the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. This translation, commonly called the Septuagint, was the Bible of the Greek-speaking Jews or the Israelites in Egypt in 2 centuries before the Anointed, and later became the Bible of the Israelites of the diaspora, because it was not just the tribes of Judah in diaspora, it was the 12 tribes in diaspora, and of the early Christians. Scholars debate whether Greek-speaking Israelites considered these books outside the Hebrew canon to be canonical in their communities, but they are not treated with the same authority as the books of Hebrew canon in later and contemporary the religion of those people in the state of Israel right now. The books of the Apocrypha in early translations. By the 4th century AD, Latin was replacing Greek as the language of the churches of the West, especially the church in Rome. When the Roman Church wanted a standard Latin Bible, Pope Damasus commissioned the great scholar Jerome to do that translation. And this is the Jerome I'm thinking about. This was a convert. This was a convert, if this is the Jerome that I believe they're talking about. Because of high regard for the Hebrew Old Testament, Jerome at first refused to translate books outside of the Hebrew canon. However, translations of these extra canonical books did eventually make their way into the New Latin translation, now known as the Vulgate or, quote, Common Bible. Because these extra books were translated from the Greek Septuagint, they appeared in the Latin, incorporated into and among various books of the canonical Old Testament. Before, that means that it was not split between Malachi and Matthew. It was actually interspersed throughout the books of Genesis to Malachi. That's what that means. Okay, before mechanized printing, no two manuscripts of Greek or Latin were identical in content because they were copied by hand. There are differences in books that are included, as well as the arrangement of these books. The current standard edition of Biblia Sacra Vulgata includes the following books not found in the Hebrew canon. See the chart on page 8. Now, the Hebrew canon, when they say Hebrew canon, what they're talking about is the books of Genesis through Malachi. That's what they mean by that, okay? Because we know the Greek was written, or was originally written in probably Aramaic and Hebrew by the Israelites, who were Hebrews. They were Israelites. And then it was copied by the Greeks. And there is evidence that there were Hebrew writings of the books of Matthew. Okay, so the books that were listed here on page 8 are Tobit, following Ezra and Nehemiah, Judith, Esther, containing additions from the Greek, Wisdom, that's the Wisdom of Solomon, following the Song of Songs, Sirach or Ecclesiasticus, Baruch, following Lamentations, including chapter 6, which is often published separately as the letter of Jeremiah. Daniel, containing 3 editions from the Greek, and that one is Bel and the Dragon, and 1st and 2nd Maccabees. Following the books of the New Testament, 5 additional books are included in an appendix. The Prayer of Manasseh, 3rd Ezra, 1st Esdras in the King James Version and others, 4th Ezra, which is called 2nd Esdras in the King James Version and others, Psalm 151, and the letter to the Laodiceans. Those are the Spartans. Okay, the Laodiceans are the Spartans, so that you can understand. Because in that book it details that in the letter to the Laodiceans, who are the Spartans, there is establishment of a relationship that they are descendants of the Israelites. Other than the last book, a non-canonical book from the 3rd or 4th century AD, these 13 books, sometimes separated and numbered as 16, have found their way into various Bible translations, including early English translations. The books of the Apocrypha in English translations. The earliest known translations of the whole Bible into English are associated with John Wycliffe or Wycliffe and his followers. These are usually dated between 1380 and 1388. Because the Wycliffe Bible was translated from the Latin Vulgate, it includes the books of both Testaments and the appendix. So from the beginning, the English Bible was translated with the Apocrypha. I'll say that again. So from the beginning, the English Bible was translated with the Apocrypha. When Martin Luther translated the Bible into German, now remember this is a Gentile, he's a German Gentile, in 1534, so we're talking a little less than 200 years later, he put the books outside the Hebrew canon. You see that he's the one that is credited with separating the Apocrypha from the English translations of the Bible, all right? So he put the books outside the Hebrew canon into a separate section, agreeing with Jerome that they were not part of the Old Testament. That has got to be the Jerome that I'm thinking of that was actually a convert to Christianity, all right? A convert to Christianity. This became the standard for most English translations of the Bible. You see, it became a standard after 1534 and Martin Luther's interjection into the discussion about translating the Bible. Okay, the first complete Bible printed in English was translated and edited by Miles Coverdale and published in 1535. It contained William Tyndale's pioneering translation work on the New Testament and Pentateuch and Coverdale's translation of the rest of the Old Testament and Apocrypha from the Latin Vulgate and Luther's German Bible. Coverdale introduced the Apocrypha in a separate section with a perspective he shared with the other reformers. Now again, these are all Gentiles and they're all European Gentiles. And they were saying this: these books, good reader, which are called Apocrypha, are not judged among the doctors to be of like reputation with the other scripture. As you may perceive by St. Jerome, and the chief cause thereof is this: there be many places in them that seem to be repugnant unto the open and manifest truth in the other books of the Bible. So you see, it was really spearheaded, and I want to do a video about this in detail, about how Martin Luther has been given credit as a single point of departure of the Apocrypha out of the Bible. Okay, let me say that again. Martin Luther, a Gentile German Roman Catholic who wanted to translate the Bible into German, came up with the idea to remove the Apocrypha from the Bible. Now, and you see citations down at the bottom that talk about we just read on their impetus to remove the Apocrypha from the Bible. So we go on to read the major English translations and revisions that followed Coverdale in the 16th century. The Matthew's Bible in 1537, the Great Bible in 1539, the Geneva Bible in 1560, the Bishop's Bible in 1568, all included the Apocrypha as a section separate to the Old Testament. Increasingly, the Geneva Bible puts the prayer of Manasseh after 2 Chronicles, as Manasseh's repentance and prayer are noted in 2 Chronicles 33 verses 12 to 13. Although, quote, the argument, end quote, introducing the Genevan Apocrypha rejects these books for public reading and preaching or for proving doctrine. You see, you got to see this point. The Gentile Europeans removed books from the Bible that were originally part of the Bible that came out of the Septuagint that was amongst the Israelites that were scattered into all around the world and into Egypt. Okay? We frequented Egypt quite often. Okay, so it goes on to read. In 1546, at the Council of Trent, the Roman Catholic Church declared the books listed on page 4 to be deuterocanonical, meaning that these books were of equal authority to the other books of the Old Testament that were recognized as canonical earlier, proto-canonical. In 1563, the Church of England's 39 articles of religion listed the canonical books of the Old Testament and distinguished them from, quote, the other books, meaning the Apocrypha, which the church could, quote, read for example of life and instruction of manners, but yet doth it not apply them to establish any doctrine, so any teaching. So now the interesting thing is it's good for an example of life and instruction of manners, and which would be teachings, but not to establish any teaching. That makes no sense. Okay, thus the differences between the Roman Catholic and Protestant Old Testaments were firmly established in writing. See the chart on page 7. The version of the 1611, following its mandate to revise and standardize the English Bible tradition, English Bible tradition, a tradition amongst Europeans again, included the 14 or 15 books of the Apocrypha in a section between the Old and New Testaments. See the chart on page 8. Because of the 39 articles, there was no reason for the version of the 1611 to include any comments as to the status of these books as had the earlier English Bibles. In the year before the Authorized or King James Version was published, the first English Bible translated by Roman Catholics was completed. You see, it was a competition going on. There was also a group called the Bible Destruction Group. That's another subject for another lesson. Translated from the Latin, the New Testament had been published at Rheims, so that's how you pronounce it, Reims or Reims, in 1582, and the Old Testament in Douay in 1610, following the Vulgate. The Old Testament included the books that had been declared deuterocanonical by the Council of Trent. These continue to be included with some variations in order in all modern Catholic traditions. Remember I mentioned it earlier. You go to Catholic church, you open the Bible, the Apocrypha's in there. Now they just like the Christian church, they don't read the Bible, they listen to the man speaking, and in the case of these religions, man or woman sitting at the front talking, but they don't actually read the Bible. See the charts on pages 7 and 8. The 14-book or 15-book Apocrypha continued as the standard list of books outside the Hebrew canon, included in English translations, until the Revised Standard Version added Psalm 151 and 3rd and 4th Maccabees to its, quote, expanded Apocrypha in 1977. An 18-book list continued in the new Revised Standard Revision of 1989. See the charts on pages 8 and 9. Now, I don't want to get into that. I wanted to get into an introduction concerning the history of the Apocrypha that is actually contained in the 1611 King James Version of the Bible. And that's the only way you're going to get the Bible as it was originally printed, and the way that it had been printed even prior to the 1611 King James Bible, as we see from this historical account. So, for you Christians, if you will take this under consideration, you'll be much more enlightened, because the books of the Apocrypha contain very valuable information. There are books of wisdom, there's books of history, there's books of the prophets, and there's books of significant events that you need to understand and I need to understand. Because the Israelites were fighting against those that were non-Israelites, and the books of the Apocrypha, and like the First Maccabees, Second Maccabees, cover all of that history, where you have the Greek captivity that you will not find in the 66 books. But once you have a 1611, you'll have every Israelite captivity on record with a 1611 KJV. The Egyptian captivity, Assyrian, Babylonian, Medo-Persian, the Greeks, the Romans, everything is in the 1611. Without the 1611 with the Apocrypha, you're missing a lot of history, a lot of valuable information, a lot of wisdom. So I hope this lesson has been edifying to those who will take a listen to it. And I give all praises to the Most High Yahweh in the name of His only begotten Son, Yahweh Shai.